because it was allowed where I grew up, I didn't see it as disrespect. And he would always say, like, you're disrespecting me. Like, that's disrespectful. And I didn't give him the honor as a man. Even though we were still young, it was just not the best way to speak to a man that I'm dating. He lacked I would say, the love portion of things. Like, he didn't know how to accept love. He didn't like being mushy. So for a long time, he was love you. And I'm like, what does that mean? We had different areas where it was causing us not to connect because I was used to the love side of things and he was used to the respect. And we were both lacking in areas that we wanted to be fulfilled.
Hey girl, hey.
Hey.
So thank you for joining me today. For being one of our first guests, we do have a gift for you.
Thank you. What do you have
Just
here?
one of these nice little sweatshirts that I got on, a secure sweatshirt.
So I get to rock this and represent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
What if I put it over here?
Absolutely. Go ahead. So I remember having a conversation with you one day, and you were talking about the fact that you started going to therapy. Tell me a little bit about why you started going to therapy.
So I started going to therapy after I had my second child, and I was struggling still with my first child, Ariel, and she was very emotional, and for some reason I couldn't connect with her. I'm just like, why are you crying all the time? Like, what's going on? I was so frustrated with myself, trying to maintain just being a parent. Like, you're older than her. She's like one or two, but I'm so like my emotions weren't regulated. So I just felt like I was drowning in emotions, drowning with responsibility, and just not able to just process. I just felt like a bubble that was getting ready to pop. And I'm like, I need some help. So to combat that, I was like, let me go to therapy. And doing that, it was right before COVID. I went to therapy. I only had about 6 sessions. But I would go in there and she would say, like, what's going on? And I wouldn't know what to say. I would just say, I'm just here. I didn't want to let my guard down. And as we got deeper into things, at first I was going once a month, then it became once a week because that space, it was like we were starting over. So I began to tell her about having a child and not knowing how to connect with her emotionally, not knowing how to understand that it's okay to be sad and it's okay to cry, and that I always associated sadness and crying and not being happy or angry. That means I associated that with being weak. So, or too sensitive. So going to therapy, she allowed me to really dive deeper into those things and to see why having the full range of emotions is okay and necessary.
That's really good. I remember very specifically, you told me you walked in your first session and you were like, okay. And she was like, okay, what? And you were like, I'm ready for you to teach me how to cry.
Right. That's so true. Yeah, so I'm not a crier. I say that, but I do cry. I've been crying a lot since therapy, but just learning that I can cry and crying is healthy. Crying is a regular thing that we do to express ourselves. And like I said, I just felt like I was drowning and I just needed those tears to flow. So it still took me a while to cry, but what she helped me realize is that that thing that prevented me from crying didn't just start then. It didn't start because I had children and were trying to be strong for my children or my husband, but it started way when I was little, 4 or 5, or probably prior to that, but to my knowledge, I was able to recognize it at that age. But I recognized then that I wasn't allowed to be emotional.
As a child.
Right, as a child. I wasn't allowed to be emotional. I wasn't crying, of course, because you're a child, but too much crying was not okay. And not just in the home, but even in the neighborhood I grew up in. Like, you had to be tough. You couldn't be sensitive because there was just a lot of people that were raised on survival. So everyone, they would pick with you or pick with me. They would do different things, and crying was a sign of weakness even then. Yeah. I remember being picked on at the park by a boy, and at this time I was probably about 7 or 8, but my older cousin was there, and the boy was messing with me, and I was about to cry because I was scared, and she was like, if you cry, I'm gonna beat you up. So I had to stop crying and beat the boy up because he was messing with me. So it was just like that kind of thing. Like, no, you don't cry. You suck it up and deal with what you have to deal with. So, like, going back to 4 or 5 and just being little, family members would do different things, like say stuff or, push me to the edge. And it's like, why are you crying? You're so sensitive. I was just playing. And over time, I took that on. Like, I'm not supposed to cry. I'm just supposed to be strong.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to... Anger was okay. So it's like, I'm supposed to snap on this person for messing with me or just go off. So I took on that for many, many years. Got into a lot of fights because I couldn't be scared. I couldn't say, oh, you just hurt my feelings. I couldn't feel disrespected and explain it to someone. It was like you had to deal with it right then and there. So that was...
So you were out here beating up little boys.
Yes, that was my main, like, target boys for some reason.
Could you fight, though?
I can.
You could fight still?
I don't know. I haven't had a fight in a long time. I had them hands.
You had them
and
hands.
I was the youngest of 6, but I felt like I always had to defend, like, my older sister. So if somebody was messing with her, I was outside.
Beating up folks for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally it's the other way around. Like I feel like I defend my younger siblings, but you were defending your older siblings.
Well, the one that's closest to me, yes.
Okay.
But then my other 2, they're a few years older than me, so just me and my sister that was closer. I would, like, fight her battles.
For her.
Right.
That idea of, like, fighting other people's battles for them, do you think that you still do that sometimes? I
do. I feel like I have to take up for someone who I think is not necessarily weak, but that's being pushed over. And if I recognize it, then I feel like I have to step in and defend them or be their voice. So I do that a lot. I did it a lot in high school. One of my friends, a girl was just messing with her, and I went to the girl classroom to, like, check her.
I went to the classroom. You said, excuse me, I need to go to the bathroom. And instead of going to the bathroom, you went to put somebody in their place.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's real, very toxic.
Okay. So you was about that life. Never going to get on your bad side. Okay.
Jesus is...
He
did a work in me.
Okay. Really, praise God. Praise God. So the idea of going to therapy post children, did you not think you needed therapy before that? You thought you were okay?
So therapy in my family was looked at as something that we didn't need. Like, you don't need to go to therapy. You just talk to us. And my husband's family, they went to therapy. So that was the first group of people that I saw go to therapy and see a change by going to therapy. So that kind of softened my view and opened my view of therapy and how it could change my life.
Yeah, I remember one of my first times going to therapy, because there is, like, a little bit of a stigma, like, there's something wrong with you,
right,
if you go to therapy, especially in the African American community. Even for people who like therapy, enjoy therapy, advocate for it, I think there's still, like, this concept of there's something wrong with you. And not my first therapist, my second therapist, actually, super helpful. However, she was Asian. Okay. So it gave me a really different perspective of working through some of my traumatic, like instances that I had been through. And I remember her telling me, like, Aisha, therapy is not to say that there's something wrong with you. Therapy is for when you're going through a transition and you need somebody to walk with you hand in hand through a transition as you are figuring out, like, okay, what do I do next? Or it's not to say, like, oh, there's a problem. It's like, oh, I'm going through a transitional period and I got to figure out what that looks like. Or it's just somebody, like, almost similar to a mentor, but it's somebody to guide you through that process. But therapists have the tools that you need to help you through it as well.
Right. So how did you first go to therapy? What made you go to therapy?
Baby, I was a train wreck, okay? Really, my relationship now with my husband, at the time he was my boyfriend, I started realizing that the only emotion that I knew how to express was anger. I remember there were several situations where the man of God would make me so mad. Okay. And looking back, I still get mad. But I have to process through that and remember, like, Aisha, you weren't really mad. You were concerned. Or you were scared. Or you were anxious. Or you were nervous about something. Or, like, very specifically, he used to go out, and that was just the way he grew up. He used to go out and play basketball. Like, they would start playing basketball at 1:00 in the morning. And I'm like, why are you leaving your house? Like, it's not safe. Right. It's dark outside. And so instead of expressing that as, like, I'm concerned for your safety, or I'm anxious about this, or I'm scared, of what might happen, I would instantly get, like, just pissed, if I can say that word. I would instantly get so upset with him. Like, why are you leaving? And then I would try to deflect the conversation to something else. So it's not that I'm mad that you are going out to play basketball. Now I'm upset that you're not spending time with me. Or I'm upset and I'm saying, like, oh, you should be using that time to study, or you should be da-da-da-da, and has started, like, nagging, really.
You're like, that's why you don't get this done.
That's it. Well, why you could be using that time? You always say that you don't have time to do such and such and such and such. But if you hadn't went to the gym at 1:00 in the morning, then you wouldn't be so tired. Then you'd be able to get up in the morning. So it was like this never ending cycle. And I remember sitting with her, and even the emotion of anger, it was, like, literally life transforming for me. She said, okay, what are the different words for the ranges of your anger? And so I had to actually put a word to it. Like, am I frustrated? Yeah. Am I disappointed? What is mad? What is you being angry? What is you being ticked off? Like, I had to not just say, like, oh, I'm angry, oh, I'm disappointed. I had to take the range of emotions inside of anger and figure out, like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in your anger? Because I think that was why I would immediately go from, like, 0 to 100 real quick. Like, literally, that was me.
Because you didn't have a range for it.
No, I didn't have a range, and I didn't know how to use, like, emotional intelligence to express that either. And so I would, after that conversation, I was able to say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 4. And if I'm a 4, that means that I am frustrated. I'm not angry. I'm frustrated with the situation. And so I had to learn how to process that, like, in its entirety, in its fullness, and figure out who I was, what I was going through. Why is this really making me angry?
Right.
Because I can just feel the emotions and say, like, I'm angry. I'm justified in my anger. Now I was then making it his responsibility to fix the problem.
Right.
Because to me, that was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's your fault. Like, you're the reason why. And so I had to figure out how to process through that. Say, why am I angry? Is it me? Is it him? Figure out the parts that were me, and then figure out the parts that were him, and take the parts that were him and have that conversation with him about it.
That's deep.
Yeah. It was, that Asian lady blessed my life. Okay.
So I had that similar thing where I would just get angry. Mm-hmm. So my husband, when we were just dating, he used to think I was just angry. He was like, people love her and people just think she's the nicest person. But to me, she's just angry. Like, she's just mean. And thankfully, he still married me. But I thought it was normal. Like, and we were talking and he said it was hard he was like going back and forth with me, and he was saying that it was hard for me to realize that something was wrong, that I needed help with that area because I was praised so much for going off on people and standing up to people. So I didn't recognize that what was taking place wasn't healthy, because so many people, like, they call me Lump. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get Lump to handle this, or when Lump get there, da-da-da-da. But it was actually to my demise, being praised for those things because I thought it was okay, when it was actually damaging to me, damaging to my relationship, and also hindering a connection between me and my daughter.
Even that's so good. So you had actually started identifying with your anger.
Right.
And you were proud of it. So it was hard for you to change, because it's like this is who I am. Like, I'm proud of who I am.
Correct.
And for me to say, like, oh, that was a bad thing, is to say, like, maybe I am bad.
Right. To
start self-identifying as that. And that's huge, right? Because I think the thing that it brings to mind is that when you start self-identifying, is that when you are able to say, like, you start saying, like, I'm an angry person. Right. As opposed to I'm just experiencing anger. Or now you have to divide out and say, I'm a person in like nature to God who is just. Like, God is just. And he likes justice. Yeah. And I like to bring situations, like, about justly, right? You like to defend the weak. Right. And the people who seem like the weaker vessel at that point, for lack of a better term. And so that part of you is a good part. But how you handled it at that time might not have been the best way to handle it. And I think that's a hard reality to, like, pause and figure out what were the good parts of me and what were the bad parts. Right. And to separate that out from your identity.
I did have to figure out the good parts of me, the bad parts, and not necessarily the bad parts, but the things that I could work on with my emotions. Like you said, learning that there are more emotions on the spectrum than joy, happiness, anger. Mm-hmm. But I only could relate to being angry. Mm-hmm. And my husband is so good at expressing himself. Like, let's just sit down and talk about this. Or if he got frustrated, it wouldn't be anger. He would take the time to process how he was feeling and try to talk to me. And I would say, why are you in your chest? That's a Milwaukee term. So it's like, why are you being frustrated about this? Why are you expressing to me that this hurts your feelings?
Yeah.
But that was the healthy way to go about things. But I had all my other emotions bottled up that I didn't have a chance to recognize that what he was doing was the better thing, taking the time to talk and process and think about what he was feeling. Mm-hmm. So being with him also helped me see that it's okay to talk. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to need a moment to process, because I didn't think none of that was okay. because I associated, like I said, all of that with being weak. So growing up over the years, I would say 95% of the time I wasn't looking to fight or do any of those things. Like, I was still a bubbly person, still got along with everyone, but when it came down to it, I get down. But prior to that, I just had to be hard and strong with family, dealing with different situations, and then just in our family culture, it was like, what happens in this house stays in this house. So never really having the time to speak with someone about things that were going on, even just a regular conversation, because I didn't know, I didn't engage which conversations can be held outside the home. So one thing I recognized looking back is that a lot of people thought I was the only child. They didn't recognize that I had siblings, because I would deflect speaking about myself so much that it would be hard for others to really get to know me. Like, I didn't know you had brothers and sisters and did this and that, because I would try my best not to talk about myself. So,
And you one of six.
One of six.
And they thought you was the only child.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, you didn't talk much.
I didn't. I would talk a lot, but not about myself. So we can sit and have a conversation, and I would probably know everything. I still do it, and I have to learn to share. And it's okay to share. It's okay to let people in on my life.
I picked it up in our first encounter. I'll say, because we went out for breakfast of sorts. The to eat them nasty beignets over there, because it was not good, and you were very like, still, it was like, hey, I want to be friends with you. Let's go get breakfast one day.
Right.
And yet you were still very reserved.
Very.
Yeah.
And it takes me time to recognize, one, that I'm being reserved, and then it takes time for me to let my hair down. And it's like, it's okay. Especially being an adult, where you're not interacting with people like in school all the time, where they can get to know you kind of in passing. But it's different making friends as an adult, just being an adult and just being. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. So
For the anger side of it, because it's something we both said that we've struggled with, do you think that it plays a part in why people see like black women as the angry black women?
that's a good question. So I will say, I think it's based on their upbringing.
Yeah.
Because there are situations where black women have to defend themselves, and it's automatically stamped as angry black woman. But it was like, no, I was defending myself in this situation.
Yeah.
Because other races do the same thing, and they're not stamped as angry. They can get the full range of emotions, or she was just frustrated, or this just happened, which caused them to say that. So I think that the stigmatism is there, but it's not always just because they've been raised to hold back their emotions. But I think a lot of times there are some instances where all women really are just angry.
Yeah.
Because they don't know that they can be other things, but I don't think it's always the same.
Is that something that you've struggled with? Like, because I know you just recently went back to work. Right. You were a stay-at-home mom with your other two for a while, and you just had your third one. He's so cute.
Thank you.
But is that something that you've struggled with, being stigmatized in like the workplace, being labeled as the angry black woman? Is that something that happens to you often?
Actually, I haven't. So I work from home, but I do have to do some house visits. I do case management with young adults, and I have to work with them and their families. A lot of times, because I'm a caseworker, I get judged because they see caseworkers as people that don't really care. It's like you're just doing your job. So I do get pressure from there, but not necessarily being the angry black woman. Because in my position, I do my best to try to relate. And most of my clients, my families are white men and women. But because their children are struggling in different areas, they allow themselves to be more vulnerable to the help until it's to a point where we can't actually do anything to help their child. Now we're just, y'all only care about getting your time in with us versus them looking at me based on my color. So I would say I am graced in that area not to have to go through that, because it would be frustrating when I genuinely want to help you, but you just see me as something based on my race. But I don't really struggle with that.
That's good. I know I've only had a couple of jobs in my adult life. But for me personally, it was definitely something that is not always blatant, right? It's not always like out there in the open. But I've heard the conversations where they come back and they say like, oh, Aisha's, she's just very dry, or she's very, hard to get to know. It's okay. Like, she knows her job though, so she'll help you. But when the person comes to talk to me, they're like, oh my God, like, you have the best personality ever. But it was something that I've definitely dealt with in the workplace. And it was because I was more reserved. Like, I'm not, hey, buddy with everybody. But it's definitely something that I was just wondering, and I've noticed just moving, from one job to the next, it's different. In corporate America versus like small nonprofits, local businesses. As far as you and your husband go, I know you said that he was more emotionally intelligent and he was able to kind of help you in that process. How did that affect your relationship with your husband?
So, in the beginning, we've been dating since we were 19. So about a little over 13, I don't know my math, 13, 14 years. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, it was really hard because I just wanted to be tough. I wanted him to take my disrespect because I didn't recognize it as disrespect. I thought it was okay to just speak to a man, however. So if I wanted to just snap, I wouldn't call him out his name or disrespect him in that manner, but the stuff I would say would still be disrespectful. Because it was allowed where I grew up, I didn't see it as disrespect. And he would always say, like, you're disrespecting me. Like, that's disrespectful. And I didn't give him the honor as a man. Even though we were still young, it was just not the best way to speak to a man that I'm dating. So in the beginning, it was just so hard for us to connect because he didn't understand me. He just thought I was angry and disrespectful, and I don't know why he still pursued me. And then for him, he lacked the love portion of things. Like, he didn't know how to accept love. He didn't like, he would call it, mushy things. He didn't like being mushy. So for a long time he was love you, and I'm like, what does that mean? Or he wouldn't like pet names or anything like that because it just made him feel mushy. So we had different areas where it was causing us not to connect because I was used to the love side of things and he was used to the respect, and we were both lacking in areas that we wanted to be fulfilled. So I would say we were dating. I started dating in 2010. We got married in 2015. We didn't get things together until 2020.
Baby, that's 10 long years. Okay.
So it took us a long time to just see each other, to understand that the things that we were doing were not okay. And therapy helped me a lot. Before that time, I was baptized as an adult. I was baptized when I was 8, but I didn't understand. I just wanted to join the church at that time. And in Baptist church, you had to be baptized to join the church. Okay. So I got baptized again, started studying my word, and the first thing I studied was submission and respect so that I could actually learn what it means to submit. Growing up, not too many people were married or in healthy relationships. So I had no idea of what I was supposed to do as a woman for this man. So giving him respect, being emotionally intelligent, I didn't have any of those things.
Yeah.
So I had to learn from scratch.
I remember taking a course, and I would say it's one of the best courses that I've ever taken. And it's probably the only reason me and my husband together today. Okay, praise. We bless God. Because I was a wild one. But it was called the Love and Respect Principle. And I still be wanting to redo it sometimes, God. Just, just cause. But the concept was like men need respect and women need love.
Right.
And so you end up in a crazy cycle if you're not showing him respect or he's not showing you love.
Yeah.
The lack of one causes the lack of the other until somebody says, you know what, I'm going to love you regardless, or I'm going to respect you regardless. And when I feel respected, then I'll show you I care. Or when you show me you care, then I'm going to start respecting you.
Right.
And from that, I have a huge question. I don't even know if you will have an answer. Looking back at where you both were from societal perspectives now, do you think from the outside looking in that somebody would have called either one of you a narcissist?
I think that in a sense, usually it's labeled to the man. But I think that I would have been labeled a narcissist. Based on, I also had this thing where I would kind of like punish my husband if I didn't have my way or if he made me mad. So that would be like restricting sex, or I'm not cooking today. Just doing different things. Or there are times where I would do something that was mean because I felt angry. And if he would mention it to me, I would say like, no, I wasn't doing that. Like they say, like gaslighting. I would say I wasn't doing that. Or I would just do different things that made me still look like the better person, even though I was punishing him. Or I would try to, not often, but I learned soon not to speak bad about my husband to family, but I would do different things where it would be okay for me to say, like, well, he didn't do this and that, and try to be justified in the reason I was treating him away. And I'm sure if he was here, he would say the opposite. But me looking back, I think that I would be labeled as a narcissist.
Yeah. I just asked that because it breaks my little heart. I see so many marriages, like just all down my Facebook account, that are ending. And you see them saying, and people are talking about like, oh, they were a narcissist, which that word is thrown around so loosely.
Right.
But it's like, I get the idea of what you're trying to say, but we didn't sign up in marriage to always be happy.
You think that on the outside because you want your fairy tale.
Yeah.
And you'll realize that behind all of those nice Facebook pictures is some work and some stress.
Yeah.
So.
And it's that like real concept, real idea that marriage is work, right? Yes. It's a lot of forgiveness, a lot of grace, a lot of mercy, a lot of looking past faults, covering faults, and not mentioning them to family, not bringing the stuff up. It's a lot of not getting your way and not always being happy. Yeah. Right? And it was just something that I was wondering because I do see it so much. So for the new couples out there, because you said it got good 10 years in, what would you, or for me, okay, we are still freshly married with the new baby. What advice would you give for that longevity? like into the relationship, what was that defining moment or that thing that, like that one thing that you could think of that really helped you guys to get from one place to the next?
The cliche answer would be definitely having someone that's equally yoked and someone that will read the word with you and study. But for me, one of the turning points was not only seeing my husband's faults, but seeing that I had faults and working on myself. So I had to take the time to go to therapy. I had to take the time to see that some of the things that some of the things that I was doing was not healthy for my relationship. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that I was doing was not healthy for myself, for my children. So although he may have had his faults, although he said different things, although he did different things, it was a lot of the things that I was doing that was also contributing to the unhappiness that we were experiencing. So I would definitely say, work on yourself, sis. Yeah. It's not always him. But to anyone, male, female, really look and see what you have going on and process those things, pray about those things, go to therapy, or find a male or female mentor that is married and that the people that are doing are successful in the area that you're trying to go as far as marriage, and speaking with them about your relationship.
You mentioned being equally yoked. What if they weren't when they got married?
I think that that's a conversation, because a lot of times we marry people, well, I wouldn't say a lot of times, I don't know, but I've seen marriages happen for the ring, for the title, and not necessarily for longevity. So if they weren't equally yoked when they got married, it's about where they're looking to go in the future. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I want to build with this person. I want to grow in a godly marriage. So what are we doing so that we can both be on the same page? And one person can be more spiritually connected than the other, study more, pray more, do all those things more, but it doesn't mean that that other person is lacking. It's just giving them someone that they can go to. Like me, I'll go to my husband about anything because I know he studies more and his revelation is usually a little deeper than mine in certain areas. So I can always go to him. I can go to him for prayer. So for the areas that I'm weaker in, I can go to my husband and vice versa. But we weren't always Bible thumpers. We weren't always going to church. We weren't always, I wouldn't say we were equally yoked when we started, but where we wanted to go in the future involved both of us studying, praying, submitting to God, me submitting to my husband, him submitting to Christ. So it's a process, but we both had the same end in mind.
That's good. I would say, from my perspective, and it was really good what you said, and I just want to bring out that one point before, or as we're ending. You mentioned one person may do it more than the other. Just because you don't see them doing it doesn't mean that they're any less, right? And that was a big thing for me, because I grew up, my parents were pastors, and it was hard for me with that man of God over there, okay? Because if I didn't see him praying, if I didn't see him reading his Bible, I'd be like, are you even saved? Okay? And I remember we had 21 days of prayer at church one day, and I remember seeing him, and he was on his phone, and again, this is back when I only knew how to display anger, and I am ticked to the highest level of ticktivity, okay? And I'm like, he on his phone, see, I knew he wasn't saved, and da-da-da-da. And come to find out, like, at the time, he would do spoken words. One of the best to do it.
I heard a little bit about that.
Yeah. So he would do spoken words, and that was one of the ways that God spoke to him, that God would minister to him and pour into him. And so when I saw him on his phone, and I'm thinking he texting or scrolling on social media, he was actually writing out spoken words, like as the Lord was giving it to him. And so that I think was the very first time that I had a wake up call. Like, everybody's not going to pray the exact same way as you. They're not going to study the exact same way as you. It's not going to look exactly the same, but it doesn't mean that their walk is any less than yours. Right. And so that was a turning point.
Praise the Lord.
In our relationship, where I had to be like, oh, he might love the Lord a little bit. But he just speaks to us differently, and we get revelations different ways. And I had to learn to even submit to that and be okay with that and not judge him because it looked differly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a really great conversation. I hope that you'll come back and see me sometime.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be one of the first guests. So this is great. I really love your family and happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. You've heard from us. Now we want to hear from you. I do prayer videos every single day. Comment your name and what you want me to pray for below, and follow me on any social platform at I'm Aisha Danielle so that you'll be able to see when your prayer video gets posted. Until next time, see you later.